So good morning. This is my name is Jasper. That will be on the next slide, of course. But this is the welcome and the introduction. So don't take 5 minutes. We won't take 5 minutes for that because I already did the welcome, and the introduction will be on the next page. And then we will kick off with looking at some nice features on mobile device management, mobile application management, and conditional access. So my name is Jasper. I will not bother you with my last name because it's Kraak. So that was one time. I'm a solution architect with Inova Solutions. I am a Microsoft certified trainer. I did all of the recent certifications and recertifications on everything. So let's see what we are doing here. So Microsoft created what they call a holistic view on security, and it consists of a couple of pillars, and that is really something that the whole approach of security is becoming really different nowadays. So bear with me to see how that works. So last month there was a webinar on identity management because that's well, one of the main pillars, of course. How can you prove that you are who you say you are and everything that comes with that, where maybe username and password is just not good enough. This month we're talking about conditional access. Next month we'll talk about information protection, and then in May we'll talk about threat protection, and then in June we'll talk about governance and compliance. So these are the pillars of Microsoft's current view approach on security, and this is what all their products are about. Now, in the invitation, there was something on mobile device management and mobile application management, but really those terms are already outdated. So the life cycle of mobile device management and mobile application management are a bit outdated. What is the goal of mobile device management and mobile application management? The goal is to have control on access and stay in control of corporate information. So the goal is not to manage a mobile device. The goal is not to manage a mobile application. The goal is to protect corporate content and to allow or block people from accessing that corporate information. And of course, doing some threat protection on those devices as well. So I called it this month's the conditional access situation. And okay, so there we may have an issue. So what is relevant when you look at access management? So there's a couple of different entities involved there. The first one is, of course, the user. So what privileges does that specific user has to access certain information through a application, a browser or a real application or a web application or whatever. Then the second entity would be the device. Where is the user coming from? Is he using an Android phone or an iPad or a Windows computer? That is relevant. Then the third one, of course, is what is the application that the user is opening, and what kind of content, what kind of information does that application try to access? So what is the app, the content requested by the user on that specific device? And then we apply policy on that, and the result of that policy can be that the user gets access, the user gets no access, The user will be confronted with multi-factor authentication. That was covered in the seminar of February. The user may be confronted with limited access, or the user may even be confronted with a forced password reset. So we'll go over a couple of those scenarios in this webinar. So let's have a look at the user first. So here we have the user, and then there's a couple of things that are interesting about a user. There is something called privileged users, role-based access, and all the goodies that come with that. This is not a technical deep dive, so I'm not going to go into all of that, but it is a relevant portion of who is the user and what privileges does that user have. Then, of course, we have our good old security groups. So in what category, in what security group does this user live? Because we manage a lot of our content protection through security groups. Then what kind of device is the user using? So nowadays we almost call everything mobile except for the classic desktop. But a laptop, even if it sits in the office, it's almost considered mobile because, hey, it's a laptop. So there is hardly any difference anymore between that. And then it's relevant to know if that user is coming from a user device or through a corporate device. That's more on the device side of things, but it's relevant as soon as the user tries to access that as well. So maybe some people know what a hidden IP is. I think in the Caribbean, a lot of people should know what it is, because if you want to go shopping on an American website, then you will be confronted with, oh, sorry, you cannot order this because you live on Aruba, for me, for example. But then there is services out there that you can hide your IP and you can place your order and make your payment and whatever. But that, of course, may be a security issue in your corporate environment. You don't want to allow that. And then we have this nice thing on impossible travel. So that would mean that, well, I have an example of that later on. Impossible travel just means, hey, you're coming from an IP address located in Aruba at 10 o'clock, and at 10:30 you are accessing the same information coming from an IP address located in Siberia. That is called impossible travel. And that is a security risk, because that could mean that my account credentials, that my account is being compromised, that somebody knows my username and my password and try to access that same content on the other side of the world. So let's have a look at the device. So on the device, there is a lot to manage and say on the device as well. One of the first things is the health state of a device. So the health state is a declaration from the device, hey, my threat protection is up to date, my firewall is on. So those are conditions. You can specify those as conditions later on in the policy, that stuff like this has to be in place, otherwise you will get your limited access or no access or multi-factor authentication or whatever thrown at you. Then we have a couple of configuration options. So we can have devices that are fully managed by Azure Active Directory. So fully managed by Microsoft Intune. So that means device management, application management. There's also an option that it's partly managed. We call that Azure AD registered. Then we have a little less possibilities of managing that device. And then finally, we have unmanaged devices, but hey, we can still do a lot in restricting access from unmanaged devices, or allow access from unmanaged devices. It's very granular. Over here, we also have the impossible travel issue because, hey, it's based on an IP address. So is that the user or is that the device? And then we have something like compliance policies. So on all kind of devices, we can say, hey, the device must be encrypted. And we must have a password policy with a strong password, a minimum of 12 characters, including the caps and the special signs and whatever. And also on the PIN. If you unlock your device with a PIN, then we can set restrictions to that as well. Like it must be at least 6 digits and it must be refreshed every 6 weeks or whatever. So we can set compliance rules for the device. And that, of course, has an impact on the policy that we are going to set later on in, hey, what are the conditions that has to be met to allow or block access to a certain type of content. So in the access policy, we classify those conditions as low, medium, and high, and actually the result out of that can be 5 things. So the first one would be just a blunt access denied. Sorry, you cannot access this. And I'll have a couple of examples later on what that looks like from the end user experience, not from the IT professional experience, but from the end user experience. Then you can have situations where multi-factor authentication would kick in. Hey, you're accessing this from an unmanaged device, for example. You need to prove that you are who you say you are. Here you have your multi-factor authentication. Please authenticate, and then you will be allowed access. So a third one could be that you have limited access. So you would only have like access through the browser. So you can open a Word document that sits somewhere in SharePoint or OneDrive, but you cannot download that document. You cannot work on it locally. You can only, so the bits and bytes, they stay in the cloud. They stay protected. So you can view, you can edit, but you cannot download or synchronize that library to your local device. Then of course we have full access. Well, that's the least relevant one for conditional access. Full access is full access. Then the user does not get disturbed by anything. And then we have this thing called a password reset. All of a sudden you try to sign in and you just get the message, hey, you need to reset your password because we discovered that your account has been compromised. So you better reset your password to keep alive. So this is how what the whole picture looks like. So we have the user, we have the device, we have the application and the content. Everything looks good, and then the policy kicks in. And it discovers, hey, we have a low access risk, so we will allow access for that particular user coming from that particular device because all the conditions are met. So we will allow full access to this travel expense application. I need to thank Ronald, who is also in this call, for this slide because he created this one. But this is the picture. This is what conditional access looks like. This is how it works. So that is all fine and that's all very theoretical, but now just let's have a look at what's the user experience over here. So, oh, I need to go back one. So here I try to open a OneDrive in a browser, and this is from a unmanaged device. So I get the message. So I can open files, but they stay in the browser. I can edit them. I can read them. Whatever. But it says clearly, doesn't allow you to download, print, or sync using this device, because the device is not marked as compliant, or it's not joined to my domain. So this is a good example of limited access. There's a lot you can do, but you cannot do everything. It's not the same as full access. So here we have some impossible travel. So here we see a user. He's actually from our own company. Hey, Mario, you're in here as well. So Mario was in Puerto Rico on a certain IP address, and then 109 minutes later, he suddenly was on an IP address in the United States. What's going on here? How can he do that? That's called impossible travel. So you can maybe be confronted with that one. Or you can be confronted with multi-factor authentication that kicks in. So I try to sign in, and that's fine, but I needed to approve my sign-in, and I just made 2 screenshots of so-called passwordless sign-in. I'm not clear on if that was covered last month in the identity webinar, but the less times you need to sign in with a password, the more secure your password remains. Every time you have to type it, hey, you never know who is monitoring your keystrokes. So this is so-called passwordless sign-in. I just get a number, and on my phone I have to tap the correct number and then use my fingerprint to unlock my phone, and then I'm approved. So that just might kick in if I'm coming from some untrusted location or untrusted device. Multi-factor authentication may kick in. And here we have the update your password. So the clever thing about using Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Intune and Microsoft 365 is that because Microsoft, they do like 2 billion authentications a day and really large numbers, and they use artificial intelligence on that and machine learning on that. And they know, for example, if your username and your password are for sale, because there are places on the internet where you actually can buy account information. I mean, we read about that all of the time. So Microsoft, very fast, they just go through all of those locations and see if the username that you typed in is in one of those sites where your username is for sale. And then they do it very clever, and they just say, hey, someone may have had access to your account. You need to choose a new password. So then you will be forced to set a new password, and then you're good to go again, because then that compromised account, yeah, they still have your account name, but that is only half of the secret, and the second part, of course, is your password. So this one may kick in as well. Then we have an example where the device is not compliant. So this is a screenshot from a jailbroken iOS device, and I can put in my policy, hey, if the device is jailbroken, access is denied. So you cannot use this application because you're using a jailbroken device. And yeah, well, that's just bad luck. And then we have the situation where a lot of the stuff seems to be all right. So your device seems to be all right, and the user seems to be all right, but the application you are using trying to reach that content, the application hasn't been approved. So this is the message that you will get then. So that can be a certain browser or a application on your phone or whatever, and you will just get the notification you can't get there from here. So exactly, contact your IT department and ask them, hey, what application should I use if I want to access that and that content? So these are just a couple of examples, and the list is endless, because we can do it very granular in setting those conditional access policies and compliance policies and whatever. But Microsoft has done, I think, a great job in creating also those responses for the end user experience, so that the end user can also understand what is going on, instead of just access denied. Please contact your IT department. That is just not good enough. And in this example, hey, it's about the application. So this is mobile application management. The application has not been approved to access this content from that device for that and that user. So I will, if people can use, please, the text box to do their questions, because I have everybody can unmute themselves. So if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. And well, Jonathan, there's a lot of places where you configure all of that. The whole security thing with Office 365, Microsoft 365, Microsoft Intune, Azure AD. I can think of at least 15,000 or more settings that you can configure. So it's what is really relevant is for IT people or for organizations, it's not so much on the how-to. You can find that on the internet, on training or whatever, on how do I do that. No, the really relevant question is, why should I do that? What policies, business-wise, what policies do you need to apply? I'll give you a very short example. I recently got a question from a customer, and he said, my security officer wants me to encrypt all our email messages. And my reply was, why? Do you have an instance where corporate information was compromised because of an email that was not encrypted? And he said, no, not as far as I know. And so, but then you have no valid business reason to require that all emails be encrypted. I don't suggest that that's a bad idea to have all your email messages encrypted or not, but you have to look at, so it's the business that decides what policies IT needs to enforce. It's not up to IT, it's up to the business. It's definitely not up to IT. I see another question on 100% cloud-based. No, Microsoft is doing a great job in hybrid solutions as well. So we can have multi-factor authentication kick in if you try to access an on-premises application as well. And we can do threat protection on-premises as well, and we can do information protection that we will cover next month in the webinar. We can do that as well on premises as in the cloud. It's hybrid there. It's pretty transparent. Of course, from an IT perspective, it requires a little bit more configuration and a little more expertise on the whole concept. So really, I mean, I've been spending now half a year or more, like 20, 30 hours a week on getting in control of this whole concept. And it's really, because Microsoft keeps on throwing new features at us on a daily basis, it's really hard to get up there. So I'm going on to
Jasper, so sorry that I kick in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to also include that because I read the message, the question as whether Intune is a 100% cloud-based solution. Of course, Intune is, first of all, I'm Ronald, Jasper's colleague and partner in crime in the modern workplace environments. Intune is of course a 100% cloud-based solution. However, it works together with on-premises management solutions for your devices. So if you have, if you manage your machines now with an Active Directory domain and group policies, that doesn't really talk to each other, but you can manage your devices with the different authorities, device management authorities. If you would have System Center, but I don't think that a lot of customers in the Caribbean would have System Center because it's a very complex environment, then you would have a working together Intune and System Center environment that they know which settings are being managed by which authority. So yes, it is of course fully hybrid, but Intune is the one that would manage if the device is compliant, yes or not, and that would only Intune can deliver that to the conditional access rules that you would make. So there is of course some complexity in here. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit because I saw the message on if Intune could be set up on premises. That is not the case.
Thank you, Ronald. I'm just moving on to the list of the question. So we need to restrict access to SharePoint resources for devices that are not added to our domain. Yeah, that's an option. You can do that. No problem. Be it SharePoint on premises, be it SharePoint online, be it iOS devices. It's possible. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's definitely possible. Then I see a question on Azure AD Connect. Yeah, so when we look at Azure Active Directory and you have your local Active Directory, so the first step for me always in whatever deployment or migration is to involve Azure AD Connect, because you want to manage your users in only one place. So you manage your users in your local Active Directory, and those changes that you make there, or users that you add, or users that are fired, that will reflect in Azure AD as well. And it's not really a one-way sync. When we look at stuff like password reset, you can write back a password reset that was executed in the cloud. You can write that password reset back to on-premise, or group memberships. When we look at things like teams or team sites in SharePoint, people creating groups in the cloud-based applications like SharePoint and Exchange. Those group memberships and the new groups that were created, you can have them written back to your local Active Directory. So it's not really one-way sync. It's actually two-way, but don't go to the situation where you have your local Active Directory and try to keep that completely separated from your Azure Active Directory, which comes with Office 365. That is not a good situation. Then you have the worst of both scenarios instead of the best of both scenarios. So I wouldn't go there. I don't see any more. Where do we configure those settings?
Did you answer Rinaldo Perez?
I don't see him. Jonathan. Yeah, I understand a bit. Oh, see more. Okay. Well, I think Ronald addressed that already a little bit. So if you have your corporate desktops and you manage them through Active Directory or maybe even System Center Configuration Manager, that state of being compliant and accessing resources in the cloud, that can only come from Intune. So you are in a hybrid management situation. So you manage your devices both through your on-premises management tools like Active Directory and Configuration Manager, and through Azure Active Directory and Intune in the cloud. And it really depends on, I think that is a very good reason to do so. So I'm an infrastructure guy. So looking at it from an infrastructure perspective, before you start hitting buttons and creating policies and compliance and whatever, make sure that your infrastructure is ready for it. Actually, that's the same question as the Azure AD Connect. First, you have to make sure that your infrastructure is ready, that you can manage everything. So Azure AD Connect with the right back options, if you want to do multi-factor authentication and password, self-service password reset, if you want to manage your local desktops in a hybrid situation, first you make sure that your infrastructure is in place, and then you can start creating policies and whatever. Because otherwise it makes no sense. Then you create policies and they don't apply for 80% of your devices or 80% of your users, because they work on devices and access resources that are not managed. So that is really a very relevant first step. Don't start pushing buttons. No, read the friendly manual and do the deployment walkthrough guides on how to set up Microsoft Intune or even Office 365 or Microsoft 365. No, Intune is not part of the E3 subscription, although a lot of the security features are part of the Office 365 E3. The matrix is getting pretty complex on which feature sits exactly in what SKU. A lot of features are available as add-ons on a basic subscription, or you can go for the suites. So Microsoft 365 E5 would be the most comprehensive suite. Everything is included. Even your Windows 10 enterprise licenses are in there. But the matrix is a pretty complex one. So you have to be a bit precise on picking which SKU for which type of end user. Yes, Intune is part of EMS. So that is a discussion you can have with our commercial people, and you can find those matrices on the internet. So there is one more thing I would like to share with you, because I was really flabbergasted by that one earlier this morning. Let me see if I can find that really quick. Yes, I can. Copy link. I will copy a link in the message box. This is a keynote from the security conference in San Francisco from yesterday. It's 20 minutes, but if you want to see what cybersecurity, because that is what we are talking about, what it takes and what it requires from us as communities, have a look at this 20-minute video. This is fresh. The keynote was presented yesterday morning in San Francisco, so that is about 20 hours ago, and I thought it was really good on hey folks, we have some work to do when it comes to security. Really, we have some work to do. A lot of training, a lot of learning, a lot of recruiting, and it's going to be an interesting business in the next 5 years to be in the cybersecurity space. So I'm done. We're 20 minutes over time. I'm really sorry about that, but we started 15 minutes late because of some confusion with the links to get into this meeting. I hope you all enjoyed that. We're having some upcoming events. So next month we'll talk about information protection. Then I'll be in Jamaica on March the 19th, and the 20th and the 21st. So I'm doing a lot of sessions over there. Then we'll have a Office 365 training in Puerto Rico by the end of the month, and then Ronald and I will travel to Puerto Rico on April the 11th to do a whole day on Secure the Modern Workplace. We call it our EMS event, and everybody in Puerto Rico, and the same goes for everybody in Jamaica on March the 19th. Please come, because then we don't do a 20-minute webinar, but we do a whole day on that holistic view of Microsoft, starting with a 2-hour piece for business decision makers, so not technical at all, but really reasoning the why. And then for the rest of the day, we go in a bit deeper and give some demonstrations on the relevant portions of what is possible nowadays. So thank you all for your time. I think we're done. Dank u wel, Jasper. I even get a thank you from Belize in Dutch. Thank you, Sonia. We're coming to Belize with our event as well. I'm not sure about the dates, but Ronald and I will be there. So I hope to meet you there again.
Yes, in May.
In May. Great. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so everybody have a great day, have a great lunch, and until we meet again.